Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this Puzzle Rush survival mode. I'm I thought of the cool idea potentially last night where like on YouTube, wouldn't it be kind of fun background content to just have someone go through a puzzle rush and explain all the thought processes? So I'm gonna try to do my best and explain every puzzle and how my brain solves it. And per puzzles will take me a minute. We'll get there too. And Ethan, not too bad today? Yeah, that's good to hear. Hopefully that means that Ankle Landia is treating you a little bit better. And for me, I'm doing all right. Chess is mid to it's mid. Chess is average right now, but I am learning a little bit more opening theory as um what am I saying? As black in response to D4. So that's been fun. So in all of these puzzles, especially these early ones, I am always looking for checks first. Checks, captures, and then attacks. Checks are forcing, and usually in these early puzzles, they lead to mate or capture sequence. And here, the very first check I see does in fact end the game because the queen is supported by the bishop, and then she is covering all the squares. GG's. In your apartment ordering food and stuff. Yeah. Hopefully you're on the first floor so that you don't have to worry about stairs. Once again, looking for checks, captures, and then attacks. I see a check immediately, rook to e2, supported by black's bishop covering that square. And look at this, because there's a pawn on c5 covering d4. This is another checkmate. TKB, welcome to chat. You're sleepy, and tomorrow will not be fun. Fighting customer service again. Yes, the tale as old as time, customer service. So this is a pattern that is very good to get familiar with, especially if you're a beginner. Whenever you see your opponent's king stuck behind a wall of pawns with no way to escape except for side to side, back rank mate is imminent. Especially when all of the pieces for black are far, far away from any protection. So we can see in this puzzle that rook just moved off of that back rank, and this is the back rank. So looking at our checks, captures, and threats, queen c8 check, there's only one legal move for black, and it's to bring the rook back, trying to prevent the inevitable. GG's. Alright, so very similar. Look at our formation, this pattern here, good one to start recognizing. King is stuck behind a wall of pawns. And rather than the rook leaving the back rank this time, our rook from c1 gains access to the back rank after black takes. So look for your checks. Check here. Only legal move for black to respond with is to try blocking with the rook. And then GG's. All right, so I think I see the solution to this puzzle, but yeah, let's talk it through. So again, looking at checks, captures, threats in that order. I see a couple checks. Okay, one check, rook d1. And this one is actually a sneaky version of the same pattern we've seen for back rank mates, where it isn't a king and a wall of pawns in front of it, but look at black's king. Black's king is actively preventing white's king from moving forwards. So effectively, there is a wall of untouchable space from white's king. So we can visualize this as another sort of back rank mate. So if a check is given on d1, the only legal move is for white to take it. We grab it back, and that's the end of the game. Christian, the game will make someone rage. I'm very excited. Is it me? Am I the person that will rage? Serotonin, hello. It's good to see you. How are you doing? All right, white to move in this puzzle, looking for our checks, captures, and then attacks. First thing I'm seeing is because the knight is on a light square, it is not going to be able to check the king. I always like thinking about knights checking, or knights, when they check, they're going to check the opposite color square from where they're at. So, you know, like there's just not a way for this knight to actually check this. So this is not a checking consideration. The other check is the queen. The queen has one check here, and luckily it's supported by the knight, so that is the end of the game. Okay, so another puzzle where our opponent's king has some potential back rank problems. A slightly different setup this time. The bishop is covering this square. So there is currently a square that isn't covered from a back rank mate, right? Because if we give a check from b8, king can escape to f7. However, there's a sneaky follow-up move here, because look at this square. This square is not accessible from the king. So if we check and the king goes here, Tactician Tiara, thank you for the raid. I was explaining this puzzle. The fact that the rook can actually slide over to f8, supported by the bishop, always looking for pieces that can support each other to deal attacks and checkmate patterns. Alrighty. White to move here. So again, looking for checks, captures, and then attacks. Checks wise, look, we're not even worried about this piece attacking material right now because that's not the first in the sequence. Like, when you get to more advanced level puzzles, maybe the checks, captures, and then attacks sequence isn't necessarily the first thing you have to do, but I would say that until your puzzle rating is like at least 1800, 2000, keeping that scan in your head, very good idea. So the first check that I'm seeing is queen f7 check, and this forces the king to h8, and then we can follow up with the queen move to deliver checkmate. But I'm guessing that chess.com's actually going to end this puzzle after this move, because there will be two different checkmates available, and chess.com doesn't like when there's two solutions. Yeah. Okay, checks, captures, threats. I see one check. Interestingly, this move was on the table before, so apparently black just didn't want to end the game a move ago. Queen h2, GG's. Alright, this one is a little more intricate than what we've been seeing so far, because we have more checks on the table. The queen has several checks that she can deliver, but all of those squares are pretty well defended by white's pieces. The rook covers the second rank, the queen covers the f1 square. So I don't think a queen check, but we could also acknowledge that queen takes g3 is a check, but for many reasons, that's not a great option. But look for all of the checks. And like Nova was saying, when checks, captures, attacks become subconscious. Yes, that's what I think training very explicitly with puzzles, with that checks, captures, and attacks pattern, it builds the fluency where I'm explaining all of this verbally, but I've seen the solution to this puzzle already, because I already just intuitively knew I could write off all of these moves in favor of a different check, which my brain saw pretty quickly. And yeah, you do miss things if you continue to rely on intuition. However, in the long run, I think it's all very good fluency training. So this is the check I do believe is correct. Rook takes queen on d1 check. And look at the king. He actually can't move because all of the squares around him are covered by the queen. So the only move that white would have here is to slide the rook back, and then we can continue our attack with more checks. Krishna, chaos, chaos, attack. That's how I've been playing lately, for sure. All right. Another puzzle where first thing I do is look for my checks, and this check ends the game. It has been on the table previously. Yes, the queen just got taken. Doesn't matter though. Doesn't matter. Because look at Black's king. Black's king can't move. Black's king can't move, and we have a knight on e4 that if this knight can deliver a check, that's the end of the game, because there's no way for Black to move the king or grab the knight if it's on f6. So there we go. Similar theme, similar theme. The king is stuck behind material. There is an escape square this way, however, if we go knight f3, it covers that square. Nova, maybe it's worth speed running to number 30 or something. You don't think the principles are any worse if you do harder puzzles? So when I had this idea last night to kind of explain every puzzle as I talk about it, the reason why is because I've been teaching beginners tactics and checks, captures, attacks, and I think that this level of explanation is really valuable for beginners. So I am trying to go through them relatively quickly, but I want to honor beginners and not assume that everybody is seeing these puzzles instantly. And this is me experimenting. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out later. Drift King, you caught a stream? Yeah, good to see you. How are you doing? All right, so in this puzzle, Black is in check, and this hangs a piece. This hangs a piece, unfortunately. I think that White saw a check, which is always a good thing to look for. However, you gotta look for what squares are controlled by pieces, and the g8 square is actually controlled by a knight. So the knight can grab there. The only thing I want to check for in this line is if I take the rook, is White planning anything else? Is there anything else White is cooking up that could be scary? And there's two things that could be scary, because when queens are on the board, you gotta watch out for perpetual checks and tactical ideas where queens can slide over and give checks and make some progress. So this check would be scary, except that the rook is covering that square. So we're good with this check after the knight grabs g8. Also, this rook is defended by the queen, so we're not immediately grabbing material. We are making sure that if we grab material, does our opponent have any counterplay that they could do? Yeah, Drift King, exactly. Some puzzles also seem easy, but there's something sneaky you would have to check in a real game. Right. Like, I've had this happen to me at games of all levels where my opponent will do a seemingly, like, hung piece or a poisoned pawn, and then I realize how much danger I actually am in. But in that case, we evaluated all the danger and found that it wasn't actually that dangerous. Okay, once again, checks, captures, and attacks. Looking at all of our checks. I see a couple checks, but one thing I want to point out first in this puzzle is that this rook is now hanging because White just moved the king to a square where it could attack the rook. So we actually have a dual purpose move. Is there a way for us to check the king and keep the rook safe? Yes. In fact, if the rook slides over to f2, it's supported by the knight, and White has no legal squares to go to, because the rook will be covering the entire second rank, that'll be covering the entire f file, and the pawn is covering this square, and the knight is covering that square, so that's a mating net. All right, so we were discussing this endgame puzzle where black is proposing a trade, but I don't think black should be proposing this trade. Because before we accept the trade, let's first consider the pawns that will be left over. So the pawns that are left over, white has 2 flank passed pawns. And flank passed pawns are really, really nice because kings are slow and it's hard to get to these pawns. But we do need to be careful because black has a pawn of their own. And it looks like this pawn is 4 squares away from promotion, and this pawn is 4 squares away from promotion. So we may need to account for black's pawn on the e-file in this endgame. And the reason why we'll need to account for it is because if we don't move our king on h1, this pawn will promote with check, which could be scary. So I've been trying to work on my pawn endgames a lot. If takes, takes. My question is, do we immediately start running? Or do we try to get in front of this pawn? Sometimes in puzzles, if I know the first move like very solidly, I think that this is a winning endgame for white if the rooks are off the board. So I'm going to simplify it just so that I can see the position one step along the line. Okay, so actually, it did simplify it for me because here's the thing. White's move means that we are going to promote first, and now that the king has captured on c3, we will actually promote with check, because if this pawn moves to go race on its own, this diagonal hits the king. And Krishna, you say you can never get in front of the pawn. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but we can analyze this puzzle afterwards. So let's do a quick analysis. So here we are, and just out of curiosity, king d2, you're right. Okay, you're right. King d2, I miscalculated that. So in this line, the only reason this is winning is because the king had to capture back on the diagonal we'll promote from. And if that wasn't the case, for example, if our pawn was on the g-file instead, I don't think this would be a winning endgame. I think it would probably be a draw. Because the promotion with check is very, very important here. So yeah, pawn endgames, if you, like me, find them challenging, there are some really good principles to know. So the reason why king g1 is a miss here is because once your opponent's king can escort the pawn unchallenged with shouldering, right? Meaning that white's king can never, ever, ever control the 3 squares leading to a pawn's promotion. That pawn is going to promote. There's no way to stop it. And in this case, they will promote with check and we won't, so that would not be good for white. All right, so black to move in this puzzle. And I think that beginner mindset would see that, oh, white just took a piece. We have to get a piece back. Oh, there's a bishop hanging. And that's why I really think as a beginner mindset, every time you do puzzles, every single time you do puzzles, checks, captures, attacks. Always in that order because checks are the most forcing. They must be replied to. So if we evaluate checks first, I see a couple checks. Queen has several checks to give, and we want to think about all of these checks just so that we're building our board awareness. But many of these checks we can write off immediately because they hang the queen, right? Kind of trade the queen here. I mean, that wouldn't be the end of the world, but it wouldn't be great. So I'm seeing one check that doesn't hang the queen and could be promising. So let's evaluate this. So if queen f2 check, white's king only has one legal move, and that's to go to d1. But once the king is on d1, maybe that isn't the right way to start this puzzle. I'm having to think about this one a little bit more. All right, well, let me distract myself by catching up on chat. And Krishna, yeah, the pawn and, or king and pawn endgames do get more nuanced as you go zug swung, not overextending. But yeah, the tempo is really important and counting. I think that as annoying as it is, a lot of king pawn endgames comes down to calculating. But I think that the stronger you get at practicing them and seeing the ideas, the more likely it is that your calculation on the first or second move sequence that you are testing out, the more likely it is that that's the correct one instead of your fourth or fifth or sixth move sequence. Okay, and people are saying mate in 3. So that means in 3 moves, black making 3 moves should end the game. So that's what I am trying to force here. And mate in 3 means that, like, as long as black makes the correct moves, that's the end of the game. Like, there's no wiggle room. Peachy has a big brain. Excellent. And look for the most forcing checks. Yes. So thinking of our checks, captures, and threats sequencing. So getting back to this puzzle, I was looking at queen f2 check, forcing the king to d1. And then the problem with that is follow-up, because it doesn't appear that black's pieces are exceptionally well coordinated, but there must be a win. So if queen f2 check is done, king goes here, there is a check with the knight. And it would appear that that's hanging the knight because the pawn can take back. However, oh, that's very pretty. That's very pretty. My arrows are getting a little complicated here, so let's simplify. Where we can see that black's pieces are lasered in at squares, and wouldn't it be wonderful if this white light squared bishop was able to be involved? So we sacrifice the knight. Oh, no, chess.com, let us see the pretty mate. Lan, enjoyed the puzzles. The way to solve this is to have seen it 100 times before. Yeah, if I was doing a puzzle rush, I think I would just blitz out the moves and hope for the best. But trying to think through my ideas here. Wow, look at that evaluation bar. White getting greedy and taking the rook on h8 costs them the game. So we were here, we were here, we were here, and then the puzzle ends. And the reason this is a brilliant move is that, look, king cannot move out of that check. So the only move is to take with the pawn. And then the queen can now see the c2 square. So if the bishop gives a check, the king has no legal moves, and the bishop's protected, so he can't even take that back. GG's. That's interesting that this is forced. There's only one continuation here, but chess.com ended the puzzle instead of letting us get the very flashy, pretty move. So, I don't know about that. It's a very nice mate. It is very nice mate. Yeah, Krishna, if you don't know, Krishna loves sacrificing material. So all right, checks, captures, and attacks for our beginner level puzzles here. There are some checks to consider. This one hangs the queen, so I'm not going to consider it, but good to spot it as, an option. But I don't see a way for a checkmate with either of these checks, and the queen being on light squares from a check on c4 or e6 doesn't do much. However, if we look at black's previous move, after checks, we look for captures, right? CCA. And I can see a capture that moving the pawn to c5 uncovers. This rook is hanging, and I believe that's the point of this puzzle. Drift King, the reason they stopped is because bishop g4 also leads to mate, you think? Well, now I'm curious. So in the puzzle, it stopped here. Bishop g4. Bishop g4. Oh. No. Whoa, isn't this crazy? Yeah, so white acknowledges in this crazy line that they're gonna be down a queen and then down a rook, but it's not the best solution because it doesn't lead to mate in one. But I'm glad you pointed that out because that's a good one. Yeah, that puzzle only had a single solution, which usually when chess.com stops a puzzle before the actual checkmate, it's because it can branch out. So I don't know why this one didn't continue, but oh. So not mate, you're bad. No, thank you for pointing that out. That was very good exploration. I was tuning into the Heart of Chess on Twitch earlier today. Very talented chess player, I am. And he was doing puzzles, and he had a great quote that I liked a lot, where he said that some of his favorite times in chess are exploring why the wrong reasons are wrong. Because if you know why the right reason's right, that's great. But knowing why the wrong reason's wrong gets you that like extra bump in understanding. So we were exploring why the wrong reasons were wrong. Ah, and Ethan says this one's a classic. Yes, this one is a great one to know. Always looking for checks, captures, and checks. Checks, captures, and threats, excuse me. Queen h4, check. And if the king moves at all, for example, if he goes here, queen supported by the knight on f2 would be some GGs. So, queen h4 check. If pawn tries to block the queen, we can actually win the exchange. Winning the exchange means that we give up a smaller valued piece for a larger valued piece. So notice that if we take the pawn with the knight, it reveals an attack on a rook, which is worth 5 points instead of 3. And Zeus, congrats, thank you. Yeah, it was like a couple weeks ago, and I was very excited. And you hope to one day reach 2,000 plus. Your current peak is 1743, though you've also dipped and am now about 1,600 in Rapid. That's where I was about a year and a half ago, and then I started streaming, like, with the sole intention of studying and getting to 2,000. And if you want my 2 cents, the things that helped me the most were really threefold, actually. Tactics, I do lots and 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 lots of tactics. And then also working on some opening theory, but not like too much, just a little bit, so you know the main replies that you'll do against e4, main replies you'll do against d4, and then have your own solid set as white. And then also positional ideas, because positional ideas are important. Okay, so checks, captures, and threats again in this puzzle. I'm seeing a check that I want to explore because okay, let's acknowledge there are some checks that are not good, because yes, the rook has a check on h6, but it can get taken by a pawn, and that's sad for white. So instead, what about a pawn check? Pushing a pawn. Um, if the king goes forwards, do we have any more checks to give? Yes, the bishop can come alive from f4, and that's the end of the game. And if the king goes back, we actually have a sort of back rank mate situation, because if the pawn is on g6, it's covering, and we have a back rank mate semi-quasi situation where the king has no forward squares to go to. So side to side becomes a big problem. It is slick. Okay, so now we're going to see black make a couple moves to attempt to prevent checkmate, but it's just prolonging the inevitable. All right. And Zeus, you've heard tactics are key many times before. Yes. And any specific resources he recommends for learning and studying tactics, given your approximate rating? So I don't know where you work on your tactics, but I like Lichess healthy mix tactics a lot. I find that the variety there is like just it scratches a tactic itch a little bit better for me than chess.com puzzles do. But find a source that works for you. And then I also think that if you find yourself missing a particular type of tactic frequently, like you just kind of get frustrated, like, oh, I always miss when the queen's trapped. That was one for me. Or I always miss deflections. Spam those themes and you'll start seeing the patterns a lot better. Yes, and Alon's big suggestion is the timed puzzle rush. If I'm not mistaken, Alon says that a good kind of marker for the 3-minute puzzle rush is if you can get 30 in 3 minutes, that means that your brain sees the important tactical patterns that come up very frequently. And great advice. Thank you so much. You're welcome. I love nerding out about chess and helping people nerd out about chess too. This reminds you of Legal's Mate without the queen sack. I don't think I know Legal's Mate, or at least not by that name. And Alon says, yeah, 30 should get you to 2000. Yeah, I think my peak in the 3-minute is 31. And it's good for the patterns. I don't do it as much as I ought to be honest. I said to be honest. That doesn't work. Ah, okay, I think I see this puzzle. I was kind of eyeballing some checks while I was chit-chatting. And so, once again, what checks does white have available? I see one with bishop f7 check. It's supported by the knight, so the king can't take it. So the king has to move. And even if that was the whole puzzle, honestly, ruining castling rights is always fun. So if bishop takes, king has to go to e7 or d7. So let's explore both of those. If the king goes to e7, there's another check on the table. Knight d5 check forces the king to this square, so we end up there anyway. And then a queen check. I think we will find the end of the game. Let's see the end of the game in its full state. Yeah, there's mate in 2, but it's 2 different directions. So if black immediately goes to d7, queen can come out, give a check. Only legal move. And then the knight does come in and give a check this way. And the same is true as if the king goes this way, just the move order sort of flips. What song is this? It's a little grungy. A little grungy for my usual taste. Okay, white to move. Checks wise, there's a check here, but it's not quite a back rank mate here because the d8 square is covered by the queen. So let's explore what else we have. I was trying for a second to see, is there a way to distract the rook off of the d file? Because if we can do that, then maybe there's a checkmate, but I don't see it quite yet. Rook d8 could be interesting. Doesn't quite work though, because the thing about not using a check right now is that black will start having counterplay. And black will have some pretty potent counterplay if we're not exceptionally mindful. Oh, Ethan, you posted a link that explains Legal's Mate in Discord. Excellent. Let me take a look. Okay, Legal's Mate, also known as Legal's Trap, is a checkmate pattern that can end a game in fewer than 10 moves. A mating pattern is named after the French player Sire de Legal, but spelled with just one L. Well, why? Man, if I had a chess thing named after me and they misspelled my name, I would be so annoyed. Legal's Mate involves a bishop and 2 knights, and it usually starts with a beautiful queen sacrifice. Oh. I wish they had... Ah, there's the board. There's the board to play through it. So... Alright. Knight takes... Ah, there's the queen sacrifice. So the reason this is a queen sacrifice is because it exposes the queen. So if black takes, there is a check supported by the knight. And yeah, that is the exact same pattern. So I am curious in that puzzle if maybe the move before was the queen getting taken. Okay, so I think in this puzzle, given that black has strong counterplay if we're not forcing in our moves, I think that check here, queen takes, is a strong start. And then here's what I'm thinking after that. Black still has a very, very weak back rank. So if there's a way for us to capitalize on that, let's do it. So what I'm noticing is that once the queen is off of f6, this pawn is tender and the bishop can take. And if the bishop can take, then it supports the e8 square. And we can pin the queen to the king with an absolute pin. So we can see that black realizes they're in danger, so they're creating a luft here. But it doesn't stop the fact that they're a tempo too late to prevent the pin. So we, in that puzzle, it ends in an endgame where white's up a piece. And Ethan, it was a bit different. The knight was on a different square, which is why you needed to bring in the queen. Ah, okay. Okay, black to move. So immediately I'm starting to scan checks, captures, and attacks. So first looking for checks. Because the queen is centralized, it seems like there should be a lot of checks with the lady, but I just don't see many. Because the knight and the queen from white are doing a good job covering squares. So this check hangs the queen, 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 this check hangs the queen. Well, I guess it'd be an exchange, but I think we can do better. So I don't think the queen is delivering a check in this puzzle. But there's another check, and I'm curious if this has any teeth. Because this could be similar to another exchange sacrifice puzzle we had, where if they try to block with the pawn, we can go ahead and take that pawn with check. If takes backs, takes with check, and then we'll be forking the king and the rook. And if they don't block with the pawn, but instead move the king to the center of the board, that will actually lead to mate because of this beautiful bishop covering the f3 square. So because of those reasons, I think that this is a very, very strong candidate move, and I don't think white has a good response to it. And that right there is the mixture for a very good puzzle. Okay, so we are going to get the fork of the king and the rook. Anytime king and rook are both on dark squares here, looking for diagonal forks, very juicy. Fifth king, but imagine being named after a trap. Like everyone else has historic openings with loads of theory, but you're named for a trap people try to spam and bullet. Scholar's mate. Is that a guy named Scholar? Wouldn't that be funny? I know it probably isn't, but still. All right. In this puzzle, this is a puzzle, a very, very common puzzle uh, pattern. And this is one I have gotten wrong a lot because you'll notice that the G2 square is very tender with a bishop and a queen both lining up on it. So it's very natural to ask, oh, can one of those pieces check on that square? Yes, yes, they can. And because the king is kind of suffocated behind pieces, there is a way in which to then deliver some back rank issues. However, the order of the pieces matters here. Because if we're trying to save our queen and we check with the bishop, this isn't going to work because the rook can take. And then if the rook takes and we give a check, the rook can slide back up. And we don't have anything on the light square diagonal to actually attack the king. So even though it might seem counterintuitive, we are going to check with the queen on g2. And the reason why is that white's only legal move is to take with the rook. But after rook d1 check, the rook in this line will be pinned because the bishop is still in play. So that means the rook can't slide back. Okay, and white, of course, is attempting to prolong their suffering. Why? I don't know. And Alon says there's a test named after student. Ah, yes, nice to meet you. My name is Student Scholar. First name Student, last name Scholar. Pawn endgames. I'm trying to learn how to love them. And the very first thing I see in this particular pawn endgame. Yeah, prof. Welcome to chat. King pawn, robot's favorite. I've been working on them. I really have. Now here's what I'm seeing is this pawn is a passed pawn, meaning that there's no other pawns that can challenge it. So it should be on its merry way to promotion. But if we look at the square of the pawn, and the best way that I have to visualize the square of a pawn is you draw a diagonal from the pawn to a corner, and then there is your square. And if opponent's king is inside the square, then the king is fast enough to catch the pawn. But I'm wondering if we have a tempo to take advantage of here. Because if c5 immediately and the king comes closer, potentially we can use the idea of a decoy. Because in order to stay inside the square, Black's king has to match our pawn move for move. And that means that we potentially have the time to grab this pawn. So, for example, if c5, king f7, king c, or pawn c6, king e7, and that would allow us to take f6 with check. And then we'd have two pawns on the 6th rank, for example, that are 2 squares apart. And Daniel Naradinsky helped me learn this phrase of trouser pawns, where you have 2 passed pawns that are 2 or more files apart, and one of them will be able to promote because the other can act as a decoy for the king. So because of that, I think I feel good enough in taking that. And this actually simplifies our job a lot because the king is now outside of the square, meaning that our pawn has no challengers. And even though this pawn will become a passed pawn, it's too slow because we'll promote first. And yeah, look at this. The king was too slow. Okay, so the queen just took a rook on e7. So beginner knee-jerk reaction might be like, oh, I gotta get material back. But I wonder, look at the light squares. We have a dark or light squared bishop and a queen that are on the light squares. And White's king just seems like there should be some infiltration to allow for mate ideas, potentially. That's where my brain is going initially. Ah, Sonja Lang, thank you for the follow. I hope you're doing well. So for example, if we go queen h3, what's White's best try? I don't consider what else? What do you mean by that? Yeah, Prof, that's what I was calculating in my head. So if queen goes h3, the problem is, yes, the light squares are weak, but this isn't forcing enough to win the game because White can help prevent the bishop from sliding in by playing f3. So instead of playing queen h3, because we know that f3 would be a problem, what if we play queen f3, preventing the idea of f3? Because even if they try pushing the h-pawn, that's not a problem because the h-pawn won't be defended. So then we can infiltrate with the bishop and coordinate on the g2 square, and the rook is paralyzed, can't get in quick enough to prevent the mate. Okay, that's a good attempt to deal with the h3 square, and if I was being a very, very, very thorough puzzler, I should have anticipated that. Because puzzles are also a good opportunity to anticipate your opponent's moves so you're not surprised by them. Luckily, we have this move. And so it's not immediately mate, but it will win the queen. So I drew it before I talked about it, but there's two strong checks to consider in this puzzle, because we're not going to consider these ones at the moment. The first check I saw was Queen A1, but the problem with Queen A1 is that the king has an escape square. I'm fine. All right, all right. And so wouldn't it be lovely if the king couldn't escape? And the way we're going to do that is bishop g5. And bishop g5, although it isn't mate in one, because white can block it a couple different ways, the reason it's a strong candidate is because the main goal of this move is to prevent the king from having an escape square. And no matter which piece they block with, the follow-up is the same, where it's sort of an infiltrating back rank situation. And Genvo seems like a two-mover. Two moves? Yeah, I think it's two moves, right? One. Oh, that's why it's three moves, says Alan. Because white will do everything in their power to prolong the suffering, which I know engines like doing that, but I wouldn't do this in a real game unless I was being really salty. Oh, that's right. So here we go. Now we have a king completely paralyzed from any forward progress, so there's the back rank. Builds his own coffin, exactly. That's a good way to put it. So I think somebody in chat pointed out that there are some checks in this puzzle, but I don't think that's the point, because the check I'm seeing immediately is the knight taking on d3, but the queen can just take that, and that doesn't seem like a sacrifice worth anything. So we start instead looking for captures, and we have to set up a capture here. But look at this knight. It is only protected by one defender, and this bishop is only protected by one defender. So this kind of chained idea means that the tactical spider senses should start brewing. So is there a way for us to add pressure to some of this material? The knight, it needs pinning. So yeah, this is the move I'm looking at. And even though it's not like a potent pin in and of itself, I think the main idea is to remove the defender, which is a tactical concept where we're either going to remove the knight and grab the bishop, or the queen's going to move and we can grab some material. Okay, so the knight didn't move, but we have 2 attackers on a piece versus 1 defender. And if 2 minus 1 is in our favor, that means that we win the piece. Okay, looking for checks, then captures, and then attacks. I'm seeing a potentially juicy threat. Or check, what am I saying? Rook c7, supported by the sniper bishop. And the reason I think this is worth considering is that if the rook is on c7, the king only has one move to go to b8. And if the king is on b8, we have to keep in mind discovered checks, because once the rook moves out of the way, black will again be hit by check. So we kind of get a free move. And I think the free move that we're going to take advantage of is the loose bishop. Loose pieces drop off. LPDO. Meaning that if we can get an attacker on this piece, we can win it. So, bam. Now, I'm going to take rook takes c6, and this is a good pattern to start recognizing, where we take and you might say, but that's defended. Except that because of the discovered check, black has to spend that turn moving the king or getting the king to safety and doesn't have time. Oh no! I was so confidently wrong. Let's figure out what I did. So we had the first correct move, but then after this, what did I miss? F3 was hanging. You're right, you're very right. In this line, this knight would get hit, and it's actually not defended because that pawn's pinned. So Let me do a little exploring. I'm not reading chat just yet. If you see the solution, go for it, or you can type big brain. That's how I always let viewers say their wins. So this works. Go after the other pawn? That's a lot of work, though. Oh, Genvo, thank you for the follow. Oh, you know what? We don't need to go this way. I was getting too clever. We can just go this way. That way, the bishop can't see the horse, and we still get the piece. Oh, that one hurts to lose. Just so that you can visualize why my initial idea was incorrect. This is incorrect because after this can't take back because the king is in the way. So I didn't see that one through as far as I should have. And if you are newer and even though I didn't quite explain this puzzle correctly the first time, I would encourage you to always look and see why is your idea incorrect, because that's also very valuable for learning. Okay, so let me take a moment to solve this puzzle. My first move was going to be this because it does hit a fork immediately. However, I think we have a stronger option, and that's one of the reasons why looking for all of your checks is important before you immediately blitz out a move. Because yes, there is a knight check, but I see another knight check that actually, that's the end of the game. Look at this one. Kind of a sneaky one. Knight hanging out on the 7th rank. But knight c5 check. And as someone in chat pointed out, this king has no squares. The rook's cutting off the 2nd rank. The knight and the bishop are both coordinating to cut off e3. And yeah, that's a smothered king. Actually, speaking of Queen's Gambit, we have a Queen's Gambit tactic here. Because look, d4, c4 was played. Looks like they were going for some kind of Slav setup. Unfortunately, big blunder. Big blunder. Because always looking for checks, even in the opening. And the reason that this is a blunder is because usually in the Queen's Gambit, this check doesn't have any teeth to it because the knight can block the check while defending the bishop. But once b6 is played, the knight isn't protected if it tries to block that check. So we can win some material, but let's be careful because if queen takes immediately, bishop might have something to say about that. So is that actually a problem? That's what I'm trying to evaluate. Queen really would just have the b7 square to escape to. And then if the bishop tries to come back, then the rook is unprotected. So I think we're still safe here. Yeah, and then the queen could escape as she wanted to. Okay, so black just took a pawn here, and it's interesting. Because I think like a few puzzles ago, we had a kind of similar theme where the bishop right now is being defended only by the rook. And the knight could be attacking the bishop if the rook wasn't there. So the first thing that I'm trying to evaluate is, can we make the rook leave? And if we make the rook leave with a move like c5, what is black going to do? And the move that I anticipate black would make here is pushing a pawn of their own. And then we get into a kind of spicy situation. But I think that we can actually just slide the rook to d3, and then black still has the same problems. So their attempt at a counter threat doesn't have any teeth to it. And the check, yeah, some of you guys are talking about the check here. So the check, in my head, I immediately was looking at these checks, also anticipating, like, is there anything here? But I think that all of those are too slow because everything is adequately defended from those checking squares right now. So I feel pretty good about the move c5 because it is removing a defender. All right. So this is also why the check is important, is black's attempt to pin here doesn't work because this is taking with check. And then white can be a piece up in an endgame, maybe trade if they want. Actually, I don't even know if I would trade there. And here's why I don't know if I would trade. I suppose if that's played, if the king like goes this way, then I might not trade. Because if we trade, the only thing I would be potentially concerned about is two passed pawns in the center. But looking at the rest of the pawn structure, the fact that there's a pawn on c5 that's very close to promoting and black's king can't get there in time because of the rule of the square, this actually isn't a problem, so I would trade. Lumbit, hello! Welcome, how are you doing today? Yeah, we queen in 3 versus their 4, and then we win the game. All right, I think I'm going to count material, but I think we actually have a potential queen sacrifice, or at least on the surface it appears to be a queen sacrifice. So this is the first move I'm looking at because looking at black's material, nothing is in range to actually deliver a meaningful check for black. Yeah, we got this one, but for many reasons. We're not going to do that. And instead, we start looking for captures. And the capture I'm seeing is queen takes d4. Now you might ask yourself, whoa, 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 whoa. Why are we taking a knight when they're going to win a queen? Except they're not, because look at white's queen. If we take and they take back, the queen's undefended. So the knight, for all purposes, is free. But let me do a quick material count to make sure that's actually the best option here, because white has 2 rooks, black has 2 rooks, white and black each have a queen, white and black each have 2 minor pieces. And then counting pawns, I see 7 pawns for white and 7 pawns for black. So this would win a piece and probably lead to winning the game. Oh wow, they actually did take there. I'm kind of surprised. Is that the strongest move, really? Okay, so queen just took, and the engine is saying what? Uh, go home, engine, you're drunk. Okay, now it's fixed. Yeah, the top move is to take the queen. Other considerations? Bishop g3? Or playing a g3 move, because If they don't take the queen back, this bishop is something that needs to be accounted for. Stream is fine. Chess.com is just slow, super slow at times. Okay, so it's not just me. Yeah, earlier today when I was playing a game, I was noticing that too, and I was like, is this just me? And if you're not taking the queen with white, the center crumbles. That's a good point. Because, like, let's say they do go back this way. And then queen g4, rook d1. And rook d1 is good because otherwise there's a fork threat. Although, that would be annoying. Yeah, I mean, if I were white, I would much rather end up in this position because it's a little more complicated. But the ancient doesn't know that. And Prof says C does block the center. So it does lock the center this way. So I guess it's what kind of complication do you want? Do you want a closed center that is not great for this dark squared bishop? Or do you want complications with queens still being on the board? Yeah, how deep is the engine calculating? I have it on 17, a depth of 17 right now. So it's like medium depth. But either way, like, it should be a winning game for what side we were playing as white. Enough, hello. How are you doing today? Yeah, they start getting trickier in the 30s, and 40 is where I really start having to think. Okay, so black to move. Looking for checks, captures, and then attacks. Let's be diligent. There is a check here, technically. But I don't know if that's great. I think it's not. Other things. The first move I'm seriously eyeballing is rook takes c1. And the reason I'm eyeballing that, I don't think that's it, actually. But the reason I was eyeballing it was, you know, king's on the back, kind of removes a defender here, but not actually. Yeah, so move order capture problem. And Enough, you're doing great. Thanks for asking. You're welcome. And I'm glad you're doing great. So let's see. Black would appear that they have a slight pickle they need to take care of because this knight is getting attacked by two things and is only being defended by one thing who is a very powerful lady. So ideally, we would not lose the powerful lady. So, what do we do about that? And we can't even leave this square with the knight to save it because it seems like it's being pinned. So are there any, like, counterattacks that we could do? Like, sometimes in games when it appears that all hope is lost, just start bullying your opponent in other ways. Because this bishop is doing quite a nice job covering diagonals. So this seems like it would push the queen elsewhere. For example, if she gets passive and goes here, Maybe there's a move here, but then she can slide in close. Maybe that's not it. Find the most force and capture. Is it my rook c1 idea? Was my intuition telling me correctly what I should do? And then I second guessed myself? Because here's what I'm thinking, is that if this and this, yes, we've got this, and actually this won't work because the rook will be hit, but if this is played, and then either piece is captured here, that won't work because actually, no, wait. If this is played, then takes, actually, I think that's it. This is a kind of long sequence, though. Yeah, so the reason I wrote this off, and I shouldn't have, is because this knight is attacking and it appears to be defending the rook. But if takes and takes, like we explored, we can take this knight, then, is that it? Takes, takes. So then this is gone, this is gone. Then if takes, then actually that's fine, because if they hit this, then we hit this, and we'll be up material and not exchange. So that sequence is fine. So if this and this, that's also not a problem, because then we'll be up a piece. If rook takes c1, white has to take back c1, otherwise they lose f1, yeah. The bishop being crazy powerful sometimes. Both d2 and b2. Oh yeah, you're right. This bishop is seeing very far. Okay, and the puzzle ended, but I want to explore it a little bit more. Lembit, normal life is about to resume in a few days. The World Cup is almost finished. Who are we rooting for? Or is this gonna start causing people to fight? So the reason that this was the winning idea is that even though it appears the knight's hanging, it's not, because the rook had to recapture in that sequence. So what other ideas are there? There's several that are about equal. Rook takes c1 is what we saw. Another idea is if the rook takes b3, that's a mistake because this is the idea. Wowza, okay. And then knight takes. But here's what I was thinking. What if in this line the king flees? Then that's a mistake because the knight is undefended. We got our rook for free and we're up a lot of material. And then, like was said in chat, the b2 pawn is also pretty tender. Yeah, this I think has been the most complex puzzle we've had so far, because there were a lot of moving pieces that we needed to account for, and we couldn't necessarily even make a move or two to simplify into an easier to see position because everything was so jumbled up together. Miscalculated because queen takes is better? No way. Yeah, we also do have the check. I was aware of the check, and that's what I was thinking about in this line, is if we got here, does the check work? Oh, it's not our turn. What about this? What about this? F4. Ooh, F4. That's a pretty move. And then... what if this is played? That doesn't quite work because queen takes, and then things are too scrambled up. But still in black's favor quite substantially. White just has to take this rook, and then if queen takes here, then we get the b2 pawn that way. Oh, d2, not b2. Okay, okay. d2. That's another thing I've been working on this week, is I am very bad at speaking chess, like in coordinates. So I've been doing the move trainer, like the coordinate trainer on Lichess, and it's very nice. Okay, white to move. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just get a checkmate on g7? That's the first thing my brain is thinking. Unfortunately, check and the queen blocks. But what? What? I mean, sure, black is down material, but no, black won't be a down material. What? What is this puzzle? Apparently it's rated like 1750, so it must be super hard. How do you report puzzles? I had a puzzle last week that genuinely made me mad. Kind of like that one, actually. And, I wanted to report it and I couldn't figure out how. Yeah, bluff puzzle. What? Do it. Do it then. Take the queen. I dare you. Okay. Dare accepted. That puzzle is nice as it helps you not forget to take the queen back. And I mean, it's also a very good reminder that people hang material at all levels. When I started playing over the board chess, I was trusting that my opponents would make the best move always. And that meant that if they made a funny looking move, I was like, oh, I'm sure they have a very deep idea for it. No, sometimes your opponents just make mistakes. And this is a good puzzle to remind us of that. Another puzzle that seemingly feels very simple. Yes, there is a hanging-ish queen here, but can we get greedy and go for bigger and better things? Because if takes, king has one legal move. No, wait. If takes, king has one legal move. And then I think the tricky part is that the knight is covering this square. Yeah, the queen sure is hanging. I'm just getting greedy though. Like, do we have mate? Because if we have mate, that'd be nice. Takes a check. We flee. We check. We flee. No, that's not going to be it. Like, if I had this in a game, I would 1000% just take this queen. Because, like, still covers f7, even though the rooks are trying to attempt a battery on the 7th. So if check and runs. If we sacrifice the queen, knight takes, rook takes, king runs. Oh, no, wait. No, this rook is pinned. Oh! Oh! That's good to know. Look at Sasbo and Reshevsky blunder, Zurich candidates. Was there a blunder in the candidates? Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, that's why even in simple seeming positions, Thinking about your opponent's ideas, it's good because pins exist. All right. I did. I almost fell for it. So because of those reasons, like, achoo. What happened? I think I just want to take the queen. If I'm not supposed to take the queen, uh, let me know right now. But I think getting an entire queen for the price of nothing is worth it. All right. It was another puzzle where we were just having to call our opponent's bluff. Checks help us see that there is a royal fork. Which, I mean, getting a queen off the board. What are these puzzles? Like 3 in a row, we've gotten puzzles that feel like deceptively simple. If I'm being principled and looking at my checks, captures, and then attacks, there's a check here which actually seems quite interesting. Because if the king goes this way, then there could be some mate. Well, this rook can get involved on the open file. Yeah, that's the thing I'm trying to figure out, Prof. Is wouldn't it be lovely if this pawn was here, cutting the king's square off? Because worst case scenario, like if we don't get mate here, yes, we win a rook, but I think that we want bigger and better things in this puzzle. So maybe my knee-jerk reaction to play e4 immediately is worth it. What would white's best option be to avoid mate? Probably to play f3. And then it's a rook. Maybe this is a little trickier than I thought. Bigger than average frontal lobe cortex. Oh no, Limit, my bot doesn't know that synonym for big brain. Sneaky, sneaky. Check all the checks, yes. So another check if we're being principled, there is a pawn check this way. King can take it. But we have a check and then the rook could block. So that doesn't quite work. So what if this rook actually delivers the check instead of this rook? So rook g8 check. If king goes this way, then it's an immediate GG's. So it's a coordination. I was coordinating the rooks in the wrong order. So if rook g8 first and the king goes this way, then there's a check this way, and king has to march into the center. And then we get a rook. Yeah, I think this is the critical move order. Rook g8, king f3. Is this mate? Just once the king can escape this way, that's the problem. So like starting with e4 prevents the king escaping. I mean, he can escape up, but then it's a free rook. But like, it's a free rook no matter how you slice this puzzle, yes? So if we start with this move, white has a check they can give to pose maybe some complications, because if the king moves this way, they can go this way. How can he escape up? So if it's rook g8, king f3, e4, then king e2 is possible. Right? And then I suppose we take and there's a check. You know, and rooks could coordinate this way. And so in chat, you're saying, at the end of the puzzle, where do you want the white king to be? I want the white king to be dead. Ideally, that's what I would like. So escaping up costs a rook. Yeah, there's coordination of the rooks, but there's also coordination of the rooks. If you knew how to make a clip, that would have been one. Well, if you want to take some time and figure it out, I would not be mad about it. I want the White King locked up in the Bastille. If I were French, that's what I would say. If takes, no. Yeah, like, black is poised to win a rook. So this move just gives white chances. So I don't like that as the first move. I like this as the first move because it's very forcing, because if the king goes this way, he dies. He did. So king must go this way, and then it's a fork again, and then, you know, if the king goes forward, like, we get the rook. So that's the most forcing line. And, you know, we're still protecting pawns. Why hesitate to win a rook? Because I just, like, I feel like there should be mate, and if I was playing this in a game, I would play e4 and threaten mate, but I think the fact that the rook can come to d7 and protect the h-file this way, yeah, okay, because if this and this and this, the king can escape that way. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say rook g8. I overthought that so hard. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Kind of a similar puzzle on this one, where a preparatory move to cut off the king here would be nice. Can I go back for a second? Of course. Yeah, let's explore the e4 line. And I think it does have to do with the fact that rook d7 exists. Ooh, analysis? All right, all right, all right. Okay, so this move is just played. Wow, yeah, e4 brings it back to equal. Because rook d7 check. And what if king goes g6? Then c4. And yeah, there's actually no complications here, because this pawn is safe, because if takes, and then this pawn is loose as well. And if the king decided to go somewhere different, like if he tries to attack the rook, rook wins the h pawn, and sure, there are some checks. King goes this way, but then what? Then what? So, kind of dead in the water there. No forward progress to make. Ethan, oh, it took too long and it wouldn't let you go back far enough. No worries. I appreciate you trying. Not just that pawn, but it's checkmate. What? Where's the checkmate? And Mr. Ice, good to see you. His engine, I know it's super tiny. You guys can't see it, but the engine says this is an almost dead equal position. If the black rook takes c4. Oh, in this exploration here. Um, oh, that's brutal. You're not quite, not quite. And the reason it's not quite is because a rook can block, luckily. But if black makes the wrong move, then that would be the end of the game. So it'd have to be very, very careful here. Actually, I played, was it a blitz game? No, it was a rapid game. It hurt even more earlier today, where if I had made the right move, kind of similar to this kind of move, would have been in my favor. But the fact that I defended wrong led to mate in one. Ouch. Okay, so we were on this puzzle, and I thought it was a similar theme to the last one, where it smells like there should be mate, because Black's King has very few squares that are not going to lead to dying. And I wonder if in this puzzle we have time to make this mating net preparatory move, because here's the cool thing about this puzzle is even if they attempt to create a square for the king, actually, that wouldn't be the square they would attempt. They would attempt a g6, because if they attempt an f6, a push pawn forward covers the squares the king would want to escape to. So I don't think that quite works, actually. But if a check is given first, right? Checks, captures, then threats. King goes to the side. And then I think this is a check here. King can't take because of the rook. So check, move, check, take. And then the king is like a side smothered mate situation where then that's available. So instead of that king move, no, that's it. That's it. King is in a tunnel, yeah. A sideways smothered mate. This is the key move, g6. Because an immediate pawn, or an immediate rook h3 allows the king to escape. So we must create the doubled pawns here. 2Ks develop a smell of mate. Yeah, smells like winning. I'm beginning this puzzle looking for checks. I don't see any that are worth it, because the only checks I'm seeing are queen f2, queen f1, and knight e2. Is there any others? And all of this just tying material with no compensation. So what's the next thing we look for? Captures. Yeah, and finding threats of checks or checkmates. And so the capture I'm seeing that looks potentially interesting is rook b2. Because if rook b2, then the queen would be supported from the f2 check. And that'd be pretty deadly. Because then, mate. The only thing I need to be mindful of here is black's back rank could be considered weak. So can white capitalize on that in time? Luckily, no, because their own bishop would be in the way of the queen. And sure, the queen gets this pawn if they want to get greedy, but it's too slow because our next move would be check. So what is black's best, or what's white's best response to rook takes b2? Just save that winning quote though. Watch out, world. Here come the robots for brunch clips. Like, maybe white's best try is rook over to f1 to protect the f2 square. Which, you know, that'd be a good try. In which case, knight takes, rook takes, and you know, it's up in exchange, I suppose, but black is still down material, so doesn't quite seem like it. But there's a better move actually. If this and this, we don't need to capture. We can keep looking for checks. So rook moving means that there's a knight check here that we can consider. And if the knight is on e2, it's covering these two squares, which means no matter which way the king goes on this file, because he's cut off from the f file, the queen can slide over and deliver mate that way. So I feel really good about that. Or that's what the engine does. Okay, we need to see the prettier version. I can't believe that's what the engine did. Is that the best move? I don't know about that. Okay, so the reason that queen c2 is the best move is it prolongs mate by one move. Cool. So same idea, it's just an extra move for white to survive. And from here, actually the engine has several suggestions. Is this right? Okay, the engine is suggesting silly things like this, but I want to explore this one because it's prettiest. So knight check, king can't go this way because of the queen. King must go this way, and no matter which square it goes to, queen slides over. End of game. Engine loves giving up her queen. Yeah. The king here can't move. And wouldn't it be lovely? Wouldn't it be lovely if there was checkmate? I think there is. With a knight sacrifice. And the knight sacrifice is not about the knight at all, and all about clearing the file for the queen. Because the Patricio Torres 88, thank you for the follow. The point of this puzzle is the rook is already covering the second rank, so the king can't escape. And luckily, because of the queen's placement only one file away from the rook, when knight checks, if the king decides to move here instead, queen sliding up supports the rook. And if the pawn takes instead, that's fine. Queen slides up, and then we'll see another queen sacrifice line. So let's go. Oh, snap. All right. Looking at this puzzle, this is the type of position that I struggle in, where my opponent's pieces are all lined up, lasering here, and if black has the opportunity to play queen h6, going for something like this, that just seems so devastating. Ethan, you're afraid you've had too many beers to understand the puzzle at this level? You'll stay for the vibes? Do you want me to re-explain that one? Because I'm trying to explain things in a way that, like, is digestible by the masses. But if not, that's totally fine. Just let me know. So, how does white win here? Might be a rook sacrifice. Yeah, let's explore. Let's explore. Um, I mean, rook takes d8 with check. Nice forcing move. Simplifies the position. White is down a couple pawns though, and a good pawn counting hack that isn't always super easy, but it works in this position when there's no doubled pawns and no pawn islands, is you can just look down each file and see if there's matching pawns. And so there's a match here, we don't need to count them. There's a match here, we don't need to count them. There's a match here, there's a match here, and there's a match here. So black, we already know, is up 2 pawns without even knowing how many pawns are on the board, because this is unmatched and this is unmatched. I got that from Lafong Hua when I tuned into his stream. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Okay, after the next rook checks, so checks takes, checks, moves. Yeah, 40. 40 is where my brain starts hurting a little bit. This queen is tied to the G file. Yeah, queen is tied to the G file because it has to pin the pawn. Okay, so checks, takes. Checks, flees. I mean, flees to the same spot, not the other spot. And then checks like a crazy person. No, that doesn't work. What about checks, takes? Oh, a queen check. Does that do anything? Does it make sense to move the king? No, it doesn't, because if checks, takes, and the king moves, that's the end of the game, because we've just back rank made it ourselves. So king can't move. I mean, black probably wants to move the king if we capture, because otherwise we'll be up material. So boop, 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 boop. Yeah, developing with tempo is good. I just don't see the point. 1, 2, 1. Moves back. So kind of the same situation, but with less material on the board. I mean, we have time to make a threat this way for a mate, I suppose. Oh, but if we go this and this and this, maybe the king actually goes up. And if the king goes up, then we have queen check. And if the king runs over, I mean, yeah, this check. But then the king is safe. Why is this so complicated? I'm getting impatient. I'm gonna simplify. Okay. Sometimes simplifying helps. Yeah. So now the question is rook d1 check a decent idea? So if rook goes this way, what if the king goes this way though? Then so what if the queen's the one that gives the check? Well, then the rook slides over. Suppose that doesn't work, huh? This and Alon, you think this is a what else position? What else? I mean, As someone pointed out earlier, the queen for black is kind of glued to the G file, otherwise the rook will fall. So we don't actually need to worry about a battery situation this way, because if queen h6, then we take, and you know, that's okay. So do we have time to just kind of mosey? Mosey. A move like this might be interesting. Threatening to like just kind of come and gobble the pawns, but if that's done, king can come up, but if king comes up, then the rook could slide over. I know I'm kind of going through this fast, but I'll explain the correct sequence when I get there. This is just my thought process as I'm trying to figure it out myself. And you know, like, if there was a rook move, I would say rook d1. Then maybe if the king moves, queen e5 could be interesting. Does that do anything? What about this? King moves. No, that's just losing. That's just losing. Like, another option, I think this isn't it, but if I was playing this in a game, I most likely would just create myself a little lift. But I think that's terrible because then there is a lot of potency to lining up on the H-file. I've already ruled out a queen sacrifice because a pawn can take, and that doesn't do anything but lose a queen. F4 is an interesting idea to explore. Yeah, Prof, you're right. G3 gives up the only threat preventing the queen from moving, and just causes a lot of weaknesses. So, not a good move. F4 is interesting though, and here's why I'm thinking F4, because maybe there's a threat here where if the pawn takes this way and then the rook slides over, then we're covering 2 files. But that feels very slow. Queen d2 we already wrote off because it fails after the rook blocks. Actually, does it though? Because there's a check here. But I don't know, the king can move and Prof says develop with tempo is hard to beat. So develop, the queen is technically developed, so rook check. I just don't see the follow-up though. I really don't. Because if rook d1 and king goes anywhere, like lining up, the king can flee. This. Queen d2. So I guess the question is rook d1 or queen d2. Obviously, this is terrible for several reasons, so we're not going to play queen d3 for a check. What else is there, says Alon? Well, these are the two most forcingest of moves. And queen d1 is with check, but I think that actually does fail to rook d3 because then the queen doesn't have a follow-up check. And Genbo thinks that rook d1 doesn't have any follow-up. I guess the only follow-up it really is threatening is lining up of the pieces, because if this is done, it's with tempo because the king has to address it. Because we do cover the d3 square twice in that line, so an exchange wouldn't work. And then that would allow coordination. Evisceratus mobile. Welcome to chat. Is it okay to guess the answer? Thank you for asking, but not yet. We're getting closer to needing a hint, but not quite there yet. So this seems like a nice move. I don't see any problems with it. It does have some threats to it. It's a valid move, but is it the best move? KK Cool, hi there, by the way. Hi. How you doing today? I don't know what the best move is. What am I, Magnus? If it's f4, I'm going to be so annoyed. I don't think it's f4. But what if it was, though? And Black King is escaping. Look at check that trades the queens. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So yeah, if we want to do a queen trade, then the rook needs to have coordination with the queen. So for that reason, rook d1 is nice because it gives the queen time to coordinate. And so if rook d1, the king does have several options, but I think that anything on the back is very, very dangerous. So he would most likely come forward. And if he comes to c7, queen d2 is fine. I think he'd have to continue marching forwards. And if he continues marching forwards, there's a check here. King takes. This is not a good puzzle. All right, if Alan says that, I feel better. Because if you guys don't know, Alan is quite the puzzle master. Has had some of his puzzles published as chess.com's puzzles of the day for like Sundays too. Robotness. Don't tell Sonic. And Prof continues saying, positional, move that rook, move that rook. Yeah, Sunday puzzles. And if you don't know, the puzzles on chess.com are like the New York Times crossword, where they get progressively harder as the week goes on. So Sundays are the most challenging. All right, I'm doing it. Okay. And okay, if queen d2, there is kind of a dovetail mate threat. I'm so annoyed at that puzzle. Because, like, I saw those ideas, I just didn't think that was actually what was best for the opponent. Patricio, what elo am I? I just recently passed 2000 in Rapid on chess.com. It was a very strange puzzle. I spent so long on it. I apologize for wasting all of our time. So in this scenario, I was thinking like the best try would be getting the king close. And then f4 check. If the king goes back this way, then preventing the king from coming out this way. Rook h1 check. Wow, that's the best try? Okay, I'm very annoyed at that puzzle. If king f6, then a series of checks, trades, queens, and captures the rook. Okay. So, yeah, I think it's just... Yeah, that was a terrible puzzle. I hate it. I hate it so much. Okay. Well done, thank you. And Genvo, only thing is you were down on pawns. That's true. But we still had material at the end, I believe, yeah? Yeah, at the end of all the captures, white has a rook. And so even though black has 2 extra pawns, the rook is going to be fast enough to get them with accurate play. Yeah. All right. They look like big pawns, but they're better than pawns. And what happens if they don't play king e7? If they don't play king e7 and they play a king e8, por ejemplo, then it's even more dire straits. Because if they make any other move that isn't protecting the back, like this would be mate, yeah? So anything that stays on the back rank fails. 2 big mate threats, and the same big trade we saw would be much more forced for black, in my opinion. What about king c7? So king c7, I suppose it doesn't necessarily create the big trade threats, but the dovetail mate threat covering kind of, I like picturing it like the diagonal and the edges are covered from the king. So that threat is still there. So in this line, Engine's top suggestion is still the rook d3 trade line. But what about... Ah, this is cool. The queen would cover that square. And in that case, the rook falls this way. But there is also a check this way. Yeah, and if the queen goes a5, pawn can block. And then I think that we win the queen. Also, c5 is there. Yeah, I guess c5 still leads to mate, though. Still leads to mate, and the reason why is... Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, a dovetail forces the king to the only legal square, and then that would be mate. Not quite a dovetail, but prolongs the agony, I suppose. Genvo, oddly enough, the only board you have is a venture board. What's a venture board? Oh, c5 for us? Ah. Oh yeah, to kind of like deep freeze the pawn this way. Looking at material, because right as we start getting into these like slightly more advanced puzzles, it's more likely that there's material imbalances. And so we can see that black has a queen and a bishop for pieces, but white has a queen, a rook, and a knight. So they have an entire rook up. Black has a couple extra pawns, right? They have 3 extra pawns, but white is still up materially. So luckily, we know that white has done something terrible, because it's a puzzle, and we're actually going to be winning. So how do we win? So if... Oh, shop. Well, I mouse slipped in an opening of our Lichess Rapid game today. I meant to fianchetto a bishop, or, you know, play pawn to g6, and I played pawn g5. In the opening was terrible, so I requested a take back, and my opponent declined, which that's fair. You can do what you want. But this was the mouse slip equivalent of that. I did then go on to win the game. Sucks to be them. So I see a way in this puzzle, a couple different ways to win the knight, but in that situation, it will still be a rook versus a bishop after the trades all happen, and I don't know if that's good enough. So that's what I'm trying to evaluate right now. Because, for example, if we play queen c1, check, only legal move is for king to go to f2. And if the king is on f2, then there is a check sliding the queen back to f4. And so then the king has to move out of the way, probably moves back. And we can snag the knight with the queen. If queen takes back. Actually, no, that's not going to work because white would have a very good interim move where if this, and the queen is on, nope, queen is on f4 and takes the knight, there could be a very nice deflection tactic to move the king away. Yeah. Oopsie, mouse slip. Happens to the best of us. Genvo, you usually approve takebacks. You're trying to play a good game, not just win on an easy advantage. I'll do takebacks if it's very clear it was a mouse slip, but if it was an opponent who just didn't see a tactical idea that I capitalized on, then I'm kind of like, look, you gotta learn somehow. Yeah, the pawns for black could be nice in an endgame, but I still don't know if I love it because look at black's pawns, almost all of them are committed to dark squares, and there's a light squared bishop, where for endgames, with the king being slow and a rook being able to hit dark squares, I don't know if I love that. I think it would be very easy for the rook to come in and scoop up some pawns. To finagle. I do like queen c1 as a starting move because it's very forcing, only one option to consider after it. And then instead of taking with the queen this way, I suppose wherever the king goes, you know, if he goes there, we could just take the queen and then king takes back, then we can take the knight. But then after we take the knight, look at all these pawns that are gonna fall. Champ 1977, welcome to chat. Queen b2. Queen b2 is where the puzzle is starting from. So it's a good starting move. Not seeing this one, Lembit. Yeah. Do you have to take with the queen? So in my exploration in this line, if we give this check and take... I suppose we could take this way. But then the same problem with the pawns here. There is this pawn. That's a good point. So if this and this and this... Tick, tick, tick. Because the other problem to acknowledge is that if white doesn't move correctly, they have a discovered check this way. Oh, and do you have to take with the king? No, that's why I was thinking take with the queen instead after the idea. If you take with the queen, the pawns are covered. But if we take with the queen, is there a deflection tactic? Because the rook is still on the board, and if the king grabs, then it's no longer protecting the queen from if the queen is on f5. So I already got this puzzle wrong, and I kind of just want to play queen c2. And Champ, I think that queen c2 is slightly stronger, unless the idea is the immediate taking this way. But like I already talked about, I think that this fails to rook f7. Oh, you're right, you're right. If this and this, you win the queen. So if this and this, king has to move, and then this. Oh, that's better, isn't it? Yeah, I was writing off b1, but I think b1 is important because it's check with the attack tempo. Whereas I was considering c1 because it completely cuts off the king, but an attacking move is better. Yep. Well done. Well spotted. So just to recap quickly on this puzzle, the key ideas is that this knight is only defended by the queen. And if there's a way that we can remove the knight and the queen without the king having to move, then this pawn is protected. This pawn will fall, but the fact that there's a 3-side pawn majority over here means that black has some pretty good chances. So how can we best in this puzzle hit this knight? We explored a couple options. The one I was kind of stuck on was queen c1. But queen c1 doesn't work because king's only move is f2. And then an attack here leads to some complications. Whereas we can avoid all those complications with the immediate queen b1 check. Like was pointed out in chat, if the king moves this way to get out of the attack, then the queen is hanging. So same idea, king has to go to f2. Then we can take with the knight with tempo because we'll check on the king. Win the queen. Rook is hit immediately. So I'm assuming from here, actually, no, even better. I didn't see this idea through far enough. King takes back. Because it's with check, he has to address it. And then the rook falls too. One bit you tunnel visioned queen c1 check 2. It seemed so potent, but the diagonal was the key. Yep, queen b1 check is one move quicker. Yes, and that one move is the key to help win the rook at the end here. And that's what I didn't anticipate because the puzzle ended too early. The puzzle ended here. But the key is that we enter an endgame with an extra piece and some extra pawns. Very winning. Okay, and that was a mouse slip. It was a mouse slip. And I have a theory that chess.com and puzzle rushes, if you get a puzzle wrong, it makes the next one easier. It's my conspiracy theory of sorts. For example, this one, check here, block with the rook, check here, king flees, maybe not, actually. An immediate check, what if the king goes this way? Then that's GG's. So immediate check, king goes this way, check with the queen, only move us to block, and then that's GG's. So the order here mattered. And Genvo, you know what does with puzzles on mobile? Yeah. Because that puzzle was a bit simpler. I wonder if this one is too, because taking e6 seems nice. Lembit, chess is rigged. That's why you're not a GM. Yeah, it's all rigged, they say. Oh, does this lead to a dovetail mate? If this and this, then queen can slide back. And if king goes here, that's GG. So king slides back, queen slides over, king slides up. Yeah, there's mate here. I was initially thinking queen e8 check, but that doesn't quite work because the king has some options this way. So, wait. This, maybe not so good. So I think it is actually queen e8. Then let's keep exploring. If the king goes up, queen can come over this way and escape the f5 square that's covered by black's queen. Okay. Rook is hanging. Mr. Ice, I just look over and see, no, no, no. Okay. So is this... Where's the continuation? Might have been a little hasty, because I know these ideas are the right ones, but for the wrong reasons. Lumbit, P. Fair playing, obviously underrated 10-year-olds over the board seems pretty rigged. Yes. Yes. Most definitely rigged. Is it the rook? That's the question, yeah. So, if the rook moves this way... Queen takes, and we can't take back because that pawn is pinned. So, if rook and queen takes... There's one of these. The king goes this way. This puzzle's tricky. Intermittent fasting for stream days. Ooh. You won't like me when I'm hangry. Yeah, the pin makes it really tricky. Just one move ahead. Yeah, the puzzle's already gone so many moves. It started here. And this part was all easy, but very long sequence that I probably should have calculated a little bit more thoroughly. Oops. Yeah, and if you move the queen, this rook is undefended. I say hello, good sir. Or ma'am. Yeah, this is a sticky situation. The rook check I'm looking at? Yeah, okay, so let's explore it. I guess I did kind of think it was scary and give up on it too soon. So if the rook check and the queen takes, then we've got a queen check of our own. Forces the king here. Yeah, 42 is okay. And if you just tuned in, this one right here, that was a mouse slip. I got it correct, but I mouse slipped it. So, oops. I think my peak is 55. So, yeah, the queen would be on a better square there. So if this and this and this and this... Then this. I guess it does win the queen, yeah? If this and this and this and this and this. Because even though the pawn's pinned, it's protecting the lady. Yeah. I overthought that one very hard. The first thing I'm noticing in this puzzle is potentially this queen is not comfortable. Because bishop is cutting off this diagonal. Queen can escape this way, but very, very easily be challenged by this bishop, and there's no easy way for white to block that diagonal. So I am wondering if a move like knight a5 traps the queen. And this opening trap probably still has this theory. Yeah, I think that I don't see a way for white to save the queen. And for those of you wondering how I saw that relatively quickly, this is an example of the type of puzzle I used to struggle with. I remember very distinctly about 9 months ago, I played an over-the-board game, and I ended up losing after a really vicious battle where I was winning for most of the game. Darn rook and pawn endgames! But when I was analyzing with the engine afterwards, I realized my opponent fell for this same idea in the opening. And if I had spotted it, I would have won his queen on move 10, and maybe he wouldn't have resigned, but it would have been a very easy convert for me. So then I just spammed a bunch of trapped piece puzzles. And I think that the keys to recognizing them are when pieces look slightly misplaced and don't have many retreating options, and all of their forward progress is very well covered by your pieces. So a couple things I'm noticing in this puzzle. This bishop is immediately being attacked by the knight, but is also being defended by the queen. So if there's a way to remove the defender, potentially there's a way to win the bishop. Because the knight is also covering the f4 square, so the queen can't even defend from there. So is there anything to this? Potentially not. I'm just exploring. But what about a crazy move like f4? I think this is like the second puzzle where I've been like, f4, do it! But in this case, I think f4 is strong. Because let's think about where can the queen go after f4 would be played. Can't take it because the knight's covering it. If retreat... Oh, I guess retreat. But if retreat, and we kick, sure, this pawn falls, but we win a piece. Is that worth it? Be a little scary. And they say never push your f-pawn. But sometimes, though. But sometimes. And Lundbit thoughts on Lilo and Stitch, the live action version. I haven't seen that one. What about the Moana live action? I've heard that it's getting, like, critically panned across the board. Why do I want to play f4? I really want to play it. But if the queen goes back to h4, and we play g3, sure, the queen can grab a pawn, but we grab a piece. With check. And then our queen is helping to protect the g-pawn so more pawns won't fall. So... I'm gonna do it. Hell yes! But haven't watched the original Moana? I encourage you to do so if that's your cup of tea. I thought it was a beautiful movie. Very beautiful. But I've heard the live action one doesn't quite cut it. can break principles at this level. Yeah, that was another puzzle where just kind of the sniffing of the fact that this is only defended once by a very powerful piece. Whenever the queen is the sole defender of a minor piece, and you can kick her, kick the lady in chess, only in chess. That f4 was satisfying. Yeah, it's always scary to play the f pawn because it can create some complications, for sure. Don't kick ladies. Don't do it. Wouldn't it be great if this was mate? It's not, though. There's a check here. Forces the king to h2. Ah, that's beautiful. Ah, that's better. I forgot pawns could move. Because if the pawn didn't move and the king moved instead, then that would be mate. So that's why white played f3 instead. D1 forces the king to h2, but same situation, just slightly longer route to get there. No. Oh. I forgot queens. Let's try that again. No way! Oh, brutal. No need to rush it. No need to rush it. Nothing this queen can do if we take a quiet tempo. Hunger caused that oopsie. Yeah, a stomach grumble happened. Can we call it a mouse slip? No, that was a conceptual slip. I forgot. This is another, well, okay, so to take a step back and think about it from a more beginner, like friendly takeaway. Something I found with beginners when checkmate is on the table is they want every single move to be an attack. And sometimes waiting moves like this. So it's like, hold on, be patient for one move. Just for one move, set up the KO, and then deliver it. The Hunger Games. All right. So it was an okay puzzle rush. It was an okay puzzle rush. There were some good ones in there, some good puzzles. But I am relatively sure dinner is like minutes away. So I am going to wrap up the stream for the day. Thank you all for tuning in and joining. I'm going to raid out. Let me see who's online to raid.